Well, welcome to the September edition of Conversations with Conservatives. I'm Genevieve Wood at the Heritage Foundation. This is a monthly gathering that we do with reporters. It is hosted each month by three members, Congressman Jordan, Congressman Huelskamp, and Congressman Labrador, and then they invite other members to come and be a part of this question and answer session. So thank you all for being here. We're going to jump right to it. I wanted just to let you know that Representative Flores from Texas over here on my far left, though I wouldn't necessarily describe him that way, is going to have to leave a bit early, around 12:20 or 12:25. So if you have a specific question for him, I wanted to make sure you knew that so you could get that in. You could get that in early. When I call on you, if you would just please state your name and the outlet or organization that you're with, so that everyone here knows who they're talking to, that would be great. I'm going to kick us off and ask a question of anybody up here who would like to answer it. As you all know, there's a lot going on with the Iran deal. There's a big rally. I could see a lot of people lining up on the Capitol Hill of the steps outside as we were coming in. I wanted to get your sense of where that stands, what you think the Senate should do, what the House should do, and perhaps what the President should do on this. So let me begin over here. Who would like to jump at it first?
Be happy to. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, obviously this is a disastrous bill. It is a bad bill. It is bad for us as a country and bad for our allies. It not only allows Iran to keep its nuclear capability, so after 10 to 15 years they could have that ability with the infrastructure, but it also removes up to $150 billion of sanctions, which many of us believe will be used to shore up more of their proxies in the region. It also allows and does away with the arms embargo. So after 5 years, they can buy arms. 8 years, they can buy intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they have already said death to America, death to Israel. So we should be very concerned about that. And in addition, this deal was brokered without requiring the release of our 4 Americans that are in prison. So for these reasons and others, we must defeat this bill. I think it's important that we send a resounding message for the American people who are opposed to this deal that we do not support it. I believe the Senate should vote it down as well, and we should be able to go back to the bargaining table with them and get a better deal. We capitulated on many of the provisions that President Obama originally said must be a part of this deal. We need to go back, increase sanctions, get them to agree to get rid of their nuclear capability, and then move forward.
Everyone understands how, based on what Vicki just said, we all understand how bad this is. There are discussions going on now with our leadership how best to move forward to convey everything that Vicki just talked about and what the American people already know about this bad agreement. How best do we do that? Do you function within the Corker-Cardin framework, or do you look to do it another way? And so those discussions are happening. I think, based on conversations I've had with some folks today, and frankly with leadership, I think it's moving in the right direction, and we're going to express that the way we need to. But those discussions are going on as we speak.
I couldn't agree with what Vicki said more, but I do think the way we go about it in the House and the Senate is important. The message that we send, the message right now in the media is that the president won. And I think we need to show why this deal is so bad, and I think Vicki really expressed it as well as anybody could, why the deal is so bad. But we can also express why the president hasn't even followed the Corker agreement. Even though the Corker agreement some of us thought was not really that strong, but still it set some parameters for what the president should do. And we believe that the president did not follow those parameters. And you also asked a question that hasn't been addressed. You asked the question what the Senate should do. Well, the Senate should immediately go to a vote, follow the lead of the House, and if the Democrats are willing to filibuster this, I think the Senate leadership needs to stand up and go nuclear on this and forget about the filibuster. I think it's high time that the leadership in the Senate start doing the will of the American people. They were given the Senate for a reason, to stand up to this president. And how can you not stand up in a moment where you only have 25% of the American people are supporting something? How can they allow these procedural rules to trump the Constitution? It's about time that they stop doing that. And there is nothing more important than this deal, and I think they need to start leading instead of governing. Governing is what administrators do. Leading is what the American people elected us to do.
If I could chime in on that as well, I think I have to echo strongly everything that has been said, but in particular, what Raul said is that essentially the Senate's got to start putting the Constitution ahead of the institution, particularly on matters of this gravity. I mean, I'd go nuclear on everything if it were me as a majority leader in the Senate, but I'm not. But this has such grave consequences for this country and for our friends all over the world, including in particular Israel, that I think we ought to pull every tool out of the toolbox that we can to stop this bad deal. And we'll have the American people on our side if we do it and do it right.
Well, there are a few things that we do here that have the gravity that this awful, terrible, disastrous deal has. We're talking about the future of not just us, but our children and grandchildren. This is a nation that its top priority, by their own admission, is the destruction of the United States and the destruction of Israel. When we look at the long-term effect, we're legitimizing all that they have done illegally to this point, as compared to North Korea. When we went into agreement with North Korea that everyone praised, we required 24-hour spot inspections. We have 24-day inspections here. We're allowing the Iranians to provide their own soil samples. Now, how outrageous would it be if we went to athletes and told athletes that we suspect are using drugs to provide their own urine samples? It'd be outrageous. But we're talking about the future of the world, not just the Middle East, but the safety and security of America. It's times like this that you have to stand up. This isn't about a legacy. This is about the future, the safety and security. This is a regime that has become more radical, not less radical, since 1979. More radical, still holding American hostages. This is the time that you have to take every measure, everything to do that you have to do to stop this. One of the problems we have now is we don't look forward enough. We look at the moment. I want you to think about it's not just getting a nuclear weapon. Under this agreement will allow Iran to build its conventional forces. Now, we've heard that this deal would, if we don't have this deal, it would lead to war. I believe with this deal, not only would it lead to war, it would be a disastrous war to us, because now not only would they have the ability to build conventional forces such as air defense systems, they're already looking to buy from Russia and China advanced fighter jets, Russia S-300 missiles. It would be so costly for us to go in and take out what they do if they cheat. Well, it's when they cheat. We know they're going to cheat. The cost to American lives and the cost of dollars pales in comparison to what it would be now if we allow them to continue the direction they're going and get advanced weaponry. And they've continued, even since the agreement, they've continued to say that their objective is to destroy the United States and Israel. And for us to not do everything possible to stop this in its tracks is a disservice to our nation and to those who've given their life for it.
Let's take Iran at their word. I don't think we do that enough. We don't listen to what people are saying and take it on face value. We don't do it when Harry Reid says a bill ain't going to come to the floor in the Senate. We don't do it when the president says he's going to veto something. And we're definitely not doing it in this case, where the Ayatollahs and the leadership in Iran have said this. They're getting $150 billion, by the way. They said we're going to continue to materially and financially support our allies. Their allies are who? Hezbollah and Hamas and other terrorist organizations. This is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. All the acts of terrorism in Indonesia and Pakistan and other places have been directly tied to the Quds Force and to Iran. We're going to give them $150 billion? Okay, John Kerry says they're going to use $100 billion of that to pay their bills. Okay, that's still $50 billion. On top of that, we're lifting sanctions. That means their GDP goes up. That means they sell more oil to China, to Russia, to other countries to build their GDP. That's more money on top of the $150 billion they can use to buy all the military hardware that Barry talked about, that Admiral Fallon talked about in the Foreign Affairs Committee a few minutes ago. They have said they will build up the military. They have said they will continue to materially and financially support their allies, Hamas and Hezbollah, and they have said nothing in this agreement and nothing the West says will stop us from continuing to send arms to Yemen. They continue to do that. Let's listen to them and take them at their word and understand they're going to continue to sponsor terrorism and people will die. That is the bottom line. And if you take it on out, 10 years from now, assuming Iran sticks to the agreement, and who believes Iran, a criminal, oppressive, theocratic, belligerent, anti-American, anti-Israel regime, who believes they're going to adhere to every letter and every number in this agreement? But 10 years from now or less, they will have a nuclear weapon. What does that mean? That's a deterrent. That makes it more difficult for any country that wants to stop their terrorism and their aggression, because they will have a nuclear weapon. That's a game changer. We can't allow that to happen. I yield back.
If I could chime in with one interesting anecdote that just came up from a hearing a few minutes ago. We had an Energy and Commerce hearing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that regulates our nuclear power industry. David McKinley came up with a great question and said, do you trust America's power plant operators to inspect themselves? And the Obama administration, NRC, said no. But yet they allow Iran to provide their own inspection capabilities. Just think about the irony of that. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open up the floor before we move on to other
If you
issues.
don't mind, let me just add to this.
Okay.
You go to Breitbart, the Ayatollah just said Israel is dead within 25 years. Take them at their word. They're threatening their neighbors. They're threatening us. I yield back.
Any other questions on Iran before we move on to another topic? We'll come here, John, first.
Thank you very much. John Gizzi from Newsmax. And my question is this. Congressman Mike Pompeo has taken a different tact in the sense that, as he made clear in the op-ed that he wrote in the Washington Post Sunday, the administration, under the Corker Amendment, is supposed to provide any side agreements, specifically Iran's side agreement with the IAEA for the details of inspections. So far, that information has not been provided, and therefore, he concluded the 60-day deadline should not apply. Do you agree with Congressman Pompeo, and is there support for his very fresh tact on this?
That's what we were talking about earlier. Yes, we agree with Congressman Pompeo. We agree with Peter Roscom, and we actually took a position. We want to make sure that the leadership understands that we do not believe the administration has complied with the Corker bill, and that's why we want us to take a different tack. And that's what, I don't want to say any specifics because the leadership is working on this right now, but to their credit, they're listening and they're working with us to make sure that we do it in the right way.
One more Iran question, then we'll move here.
I don't have an Iran question.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, anybody else on Iran? Okay, right here.
Lauren French with Politico. The administration and Democrats are saying, however, that if you don't vote on it by September 17th, that the deal automatically goes forward. Is there any concern that if there isn't a vote, you don't weigh in on it, you miss the chance to at least express your disapproval or opposition to the deal?
Well, we could do it in a number of ways, and one of the ways that we have suggested is to actually have a motion of approval, where we show that we don't approve the deal by having a motion to approve, and you will see that that motion will not pass. And then, again, like I said earlier, the Senate should then force a vote on a motion to approval, and they should go nuclear in the Senate and allow that to happen with only 50 votes. They have the ability to do it. They have just been unwilling to do it. And I think with matters of constitutional concern like this, matters that are existential concerns, I think the Senate needs to stop using the excuse of the filibuster as a reason not to proceed on issues of importance like this.
All right, we'll come up here to the front and move on to a new topic.
Thanks. Alex Sawyer with Breitbart. One of the issues that was looming before August recess was Mark Meadows' measure to possibly remove Speaker Boehner from his speakership. And I was wondering if, addressing the whole panel, if that measure was to come up, how would you vote? Would you support Meadows' measure, or what are your thoughts?
If you don't mind, Genevieve, I need to go to my next lunch. With respect to Iran, Ambassador John Bolton, is our speaker. I'm going to raise some of these issues with him regarding whether Corker Cardin is the way to proceed, or if we should proceed some other route. So I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I've got to go to lunch.
Yes, I would just say that I think that now's the time to unite as Republicans on the many issues that we have facing us, and I think there's a right time and procedure to choose the speaker. And so I think we need to be focused now on whether it's Iran or whether it's getting our budget passed, make sure fully funding our military, getting a transportation bill, all the other issues I think is what we need to be focused on now.
Right now, I'm waiting to see what happens this month. I thought the motion was premature, and I made that pretty clear. But I do think it's important to note what's happening in America. When you see right now that Trump and Carson are leading the Republican presidential nomination because they are outsiders, because they don't belong to the Washington establishment, because they're not seen as people who are part of the problem, they're seen as part of the solution, even though they really, in my opinion, are not offering any solutions because they're not really answering substantive questions. But that's what people are perceiving because they're so concerned about what's happening here in Washington, D.C., and they're concerned about our fecklessness as leaders. And I think it's important. That's why this Iran deal is so important. If the Senate Majority Leader cannot stand up for the American people and for the vast majority of the American people, then we do need new leadership in Washington, D.C. If the House is unwilling to actually stand up for the American people on this issue, on Planned Parenthood, on the budget, on all these different things, we do need new leadership. So I'm really waiting to see what happens this month. And we have a lot of big issues that are before us. And to their credit, like I said earlier, to their credit, they're listening on this issue of Iran, and hopefully they will continue to listen on all the issues that are important to the American people.
During the August recess, I conducted my 300th town hall in 4.5 years, and plenty of others as well during that recess. But without a doubt, my two votes in the last in January and 2 years before that, I voted against John Boehner. I think that was the right decision. My constituents believe that. They're looking for new leadership. And one thing was mentioned in conference this morning, and it was on one particular issue, but I think our leadership in dealing with the President of the United States always assumes we're going to lose. American people, certainly the Republicans, they want somebody who wants to win, who wants to stand up for principles. And their entire leadership in Washington is always looking to say, well, gosh, we can't do that. You know what? During the elections, during the campaigns, we also, this is what we're going to do. I mean, we have an outrageous expose, 9 videos of Planned Parenthood, and the response from leadership on this particular issue is, well, we can't do much about it. You know what? After 25 years, it's time to do something about it, and that's why I'm still confident I made the right decision in January of 2015 and January 2013.
There's a distinct difference between new leadership and better leadership, and I think that's what has to be determined. Being in the state legislature, we've gone down the path before of anybody's better than the guy we have in there, and sometimes that didn't turn out so well. So I think that, as others have said, the next few weeks will determine. The American people are frustrated. They are very frustrated with Congress. From my time in the district, the general feeling across the board, it isn't just the Tea Parties and conservatives, but business leaders as well, is that the president is running the entire country, including Congress, because we're always just reacting. Nothing's going to change until we start having long-term plans of where we're going, a vision of where we're going in this nation. That's what people are hungry for. When you look when Reagan started running, he painted a vision of where we're going. He said it was a bright city, a shining city on a hill. And he laid out where he was going to take this nation. What people perceive right now that we're doing in Congress is, the truth is, we're governing from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. We're punting the ball down the field instead of moving it downfield toward an end. We've got to have a vision of where we're going. If the people can see this is our long term, this is where we're going with this nation, instead of just moving from crisis to crisis to crisis. If we can get back to a budget process, an appropriations process, instead of continuing with CRs, if we can actually lay out where are we going in the long term, then I think people will be happy with where we're going. But I think in the next few weeks, we'll determine if we're getting there or not.
Thank you. Penny Starr, CNS News. Defunding Planned Parenthood. Is that a talking point, or is that something that the GOP has the political will to do, to actually really do it when it's been talked about for years, and now with the new Planned Parenthood videos that have been surfaced. Will it be done, and how will they do it? Thank you.
Defunding Planned Parenthood. I spent a lot of time during the August recess listening to my constituents, not talking to them in town hall settings, but sitting down with them and talking with them, listening to what they had to say. Nobody wants to see their tax dollars go to fund an organization that is systematically killing babies in the womb in such a way to maximize the return of the body parts to be sold. We shouldn't take your tax dollars. Y'all work hard. Everyone in here is getting paid for being here today. We shouldn't take your tax dollars and give them to organizations that kill babies in the womb in such a way they can merchandise the body parts, some of which were killed after their brains were removed, their heart was stopped. They were taken out to get live tissue. Folks in the 3rd Congressional District of South Carolina that I represent do not want to see their tax dollars taken to fund this practice. Elements of our leadership want to investigate this further. How much more investigation do you need than the videos that were very clear on the practices of this organization? The investigation's been done. We need to defund Planned Parenthood. If I was able to set up a computer screen and you were able to pick and choose how your tax dollars are being spent, you could direct your tax dollars. I can tell you the people in 3rd District would not pick Planned Parenthood. They'd pick defense of our nation. They would pick a secure border. They may pick some social safety net programs, but they wouldn't pick this, and I won't vote for it. I yield back.
Penny, your question was whether or not it's a talking point or we're actually going to do it. I think we'll find out in the next couple of days. I do know that at the conference this morning, the top line messaging was, let's talk about what we've already done for the pro-life movement over the last several years. Not sure what that list is, but I'm sure it's significant. I understand the same message was delivered at the Chiefs meeting yesterday. To me, what that means is we're setting up for surrender. That if you don't want to talk about what you want to do next week and instead want to talk about what you did last week, it means you're afraid to do anything next week. And I hope that's not the case. We start our listening sessions this afternoon on Planned Parenthood, but I just received a note from my office for up to 31 signatures on the letter, which is enough to force the discussion. I think everybody on here, with maybe one exception, has signed a letter. So I think we're going to have this discussion, and I think they're going to have to, the leadership is going to have to choose. Do they want it to be a talking point, or do they actually want to do something about it? I think we'll find out in the next 10 days.
Yeah, for this group, it's certainly not a talking point. We believe it. We, as Jeff said and Mick has said, we think it's wrong what's going on, and it should stop. Our job is to make the argument with our colleagues, continue to talk with our constituents, and have the debate. I think if we have the debate, the facts and the logic and the common sense are on our side. Why should an organization engaged in what they've been exposed to be engaged in continue to get taxpayer money, particularly when it looks like it may be criminal activity? So that being the case, how can you allow tax dollars to continue to flow there? And we make that argument, and if the Democrats, if Harry Reid and Barack Obama think it's more important to give an organization your tax dollar engaged in what I just described than it is to fund our troops and to fund our veterans and, frankly, to fund women's health issues, then they'll have to answer for that position. But let's have the debate.
Okay.
One thing to note as well, Penny, how we got here, or what we haven't done, one of our leaders noted that he had voted defund Planned Parenthood for 25 years.
How's that work?
And maybe it's time for a different strategy. Maybe it's time for a strategy. Actually have a vote. I mean, Mick and a few others, we've been up here 4.5 years, 4 and 8 months, and we've not had one vote on an appropriations bill, never even permitted the vote, because we have the votes in the House. If it's put up to a vote, we will not give any more money to Planned Parenthood. So the question is, will leadership let us have a vote? The HHS budget has never come to the floor in 4 years and 8 months. I don't know if it ever came when you were here, Jim, or others. Why not? That's our job. That's the frustration out there. You mean you let Barack Obama do whatever he wants to do and fund his political allies and friends, and you're not going to do anything? The question is not really defunding. I know we use that. The question is, will we fund them next year? The Republican Congress fund Planned Parenthood to continue their despicable, gruesome, vile, racist activities? And that's the question. And I fear the answer will be yes, because we're not going to do anything. Put it to the floor, have the vote. If it fails, that's one thing. But refusing, assuming you're going to lose, I guarantee we will lose if we don't permit a vote.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico Pro. On the Export-Import Bank, how concerned are you all that there will be a realistic effort to move the bank through Congress by way of the Senate? And if there is a long-term House highway bill, are you confident that EXIM can be removed in conference?
I don't know about conference, but we grow more confident with each passing day because, as I've said to some of you before, if we'd all predicted 6 months ago that the Export-Import Bank would now be 2 months past reauthorization date, you'd have all laughed at us 6 months ago, but that's exactly where we're at. I think with each day, we continue to win. But this ties into what Raul said earlier. Everyone's watching all these big issues we got this fall, the Iran issue this week and probably next, the Planned Parenthood issue, the funding issue, the highway bill with the corporate welfare XM issue, then the debt ceiling. I mean, everyone's watching it. And are we going to do what we told our constituents we were going to do when we ran for the job and they gave us the privilege of serving? So it fits into that. And if we restart and resurrect the XM Bank after what we've been witnessing around the country, that is a huge mistake. And obviously, I think...
Plus, going to conference on the XM would violate a promise that our leadership made, which is that we were going to have the opportunity to bring amendments on the floor. So if they allow it to go straight to conference, we lose that ability, and that would violate that promise.
And how many calendar days do you all have to get all this done?
Counting today, I think, well, in September, we got
11 days. Okay.
This question, sorry, Ginger Gibson with Reuters. This question's for particularly Representative Labrador, but I'd love all of you to weigh in as well. Donald Trump is taking a lot of credit for pushing the conversation about immigration in the primary. It is a conversation this group has had quite a bit for the last few years. I would love to hear your take on what you think he's doing to the conversation in the electorate and within your party. Is he helping your party? Is he hurting your party? And how does the party move forward?
Well, Donald Trump takes a lot of credit for a lot of things. So I think we have been having this discussion for a long time, and it's been a national discussion, unfortunately, for the last 30 years or so. So I don't know that any one candidate has elevated the level of discussion. I do think it's important to listen to what he's saying and to listen to what all the candidates are saying, because what people here in Washington don't understand is that the American people want security first. We need to make sure that we feel secure in our homeland, that we feel secure in our homes, that we're not worried about some person who's going to kill our children who is here without documentation. We want to make sure that those things are all happening. Now, what we do after we feel that security, then we have a difference of opinions within the party. But as I have indicated for the last 5 years that I've been in Congress, I'm an advocate for some type of immigration reform. But until we can tell the American people that the American people are secure, that we have an E-Verify system that works, that we have an entry-exit visa system that works, that we have the ability to know who's here. As we all know, 42% of the people that are here illegally came in through a legal visa. We know who came in, when they came in, and whether they have left. Whether we need to worry about all those things. When those things happen, when we have a border that is secure, when we have, it can be a wall, it can be a virtual fence, it can be whatever it is, but when the American people feel that those things are happening, then we can start having a real discussion about all the other things that are implied. The Democrats continue to want amnesty now and security later. That is a recipe for disaster for the United States. It's a recipe for disaster for the future of the United States. And we need to have this real discussion. We can't continue to do what the donors of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party want. And that's, once again, why you have the Carly Fiorinas and the Donald Trumps and the Ben Carsons doing so well, because people are sick and tired of politicians of both parties just listening to the donor class instead of listening to the American people and doing something to make them feel secure in their homes.
I would just add one thing. It's security and following the law, security and the rule of law. The Kate Steinle situation highlighted for Americans. Wait a minute. You can't have a city just abandon the law. The executive amnesty issue the president did it highlighted for Americans. You can't have the president just make it up as he goes. So it is exactly what Raul said, security and following the law, the rule of law, that bothers so many Americans. And that's what I think Mr. Trump is tapping into.
If I may, I think other candidates in the Republican parties and members of Congress ought to do less bashing Donald Trump and listening to what he's saying, because what he's saying is resonating with the American people. And that's obvious because of his numbers in the polls. And so if we step back and listen to what he's saying secure our country. We are a sovereign nation, secure our border. Most people in my district agree with that. He's saying, follow the rule of law. Let's end the sanctuary city policies, which give sanctuary to lawbreakers. We're finding out that rapists, murderers, and other criminals who have been let go by the Obama administration have found sanctuary in those cities. A young lady died in San Francisco because of it. He's saying in that policy. That goes back to what Jim was saying about following the law. And the third thing he's saying is no amnesty. Don't grant citizenship rights to folks who have broken our laws. But I think that speaks to what Raul was saying. There will be a time that the nation has to embrace some sort of legal immigration reform. Illegality is still illegality. But legal immigration reform, allowing folks to come here in whatever capacity, whether it's expanded guest workers or whatever, the nation will have to address that at some point in time. But what he's saying is no amnesty. I get back to what the question was. We better start listening to what he's saying and adopt that in our platforms, because it's resonating with the American people that will decide the future of this country.
Right. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Barney Jopson with the Financial Times. Can you give me your assessment of the chances of a government shutdown, and tell us if you're prepared to risk one because you can't agree with Democrats or your own party on Planned Parenthood, Exim Bank, or any other issues?
Down the government. We don't agree that it needs to be shut down. So if there ever is a shutdown, it's because the Democrats want to shut down. The only thing that Congress has is the power of the purse. And this is how we do battle with the president. This is how we make the decisions and determinations, how we can actually enact the will of the American people. We can't be afraid of having the battle, because if you already, in the middle of the battle, if you already telegraph to the other side that you're unwilling to have that battle, you've already capitulated. And that's one of the things that frustrates me the most about the way our leadership deals with the other side. Whether you're going to have a shutdown or not, you just don't telegraph that. What you say is that we're going to use all the tools that are available to us. We're going to use the power of the purse that the Constitution has granted us, and you as the media should be responsible and should maybe go to the Constitution and find where the power of the purse belongs to the House of Representatives and the Congress.
Nobody on this dais and no conservative that I talk to advocating for a government shutdown. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we are advocating for is that Congress acts like good stewards of your tax dollars and spends that money appropriately on, first off, the constitutional role of government. And so it will be up to, and if I could be king for the day and direct this spending, we would not fund Planned Parenthood. The House and the Senate will both pass out a CR, send it to the president's desk, actually reflects Republican values, stands up for life, ends this bad practice that Planned Parenthood is doing, and force the president to either sign it and let it become law or veto it. And if he vetoes it and we can't override that veto, the government will shut down because of the president, because he values the ability for organizations like Planned Parenthood to kill babies in the womb so they can systematically sell their body parts. That's why he would shut the government down. We'd shut the government down just because we don't think your tax dollars ought to go for that. And I think that's a conservative position, and any bill we pass out of the United States Congress to the president's desk should reflect the principles of the Republican Party, because Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate. And it's about time we start passing bills that reflect what Republicans stand for.
The greater issue is that we're having this conversation. If we were doing a normal appropriations process, in a budget process, instead of always going crisis to crisis with a CR, or with whatever other crisis it is, if we were going through a standard normal order process that the Constitution lays out, that historically we have gone through, we will be going through negotiating, we'll be discussing with the president, we'll pass what the American people are demanding be done, instead of always getting to some kind of cliff and putting the American people at risk and shifting all this power to the executive branch by just allowing them to continue doing what they're doing. That is the long term. That's what I'm talking about, that the American people are demanding, is get back to the basics, get back to what you're supposed to be doing. That's how you shift this power back. The problem isn't whether we're going to be willing to shut down the government. The problem is that we put ourselves into that position that we basically empower the executive branch to run roughshod over the Congress.
I need to ask you a question. Did you ask Harry Reid the question you just asked us? Would you? Because we've sent 6 appropriations bills to the United States Senate, and they have refused to deal with any of those 6 appropriations bills. And they've had those bills for months now, and they haven't dealt with a single one. This isn't anything to do with the Republicans shutting government down. Harry Reid has caused this mess, and he's doing it at the direction of the president. And to suggest that somehow Republicans have found an issue to fight over is absolute nonsense. If we had pursued regular order, and we had presented and the Senate had dealt with the bills that we have sent them, we would then be talking about fighting over an HHS budget or fighting over a limited budget. We would have the Department of Defense defending our country. We would have the HHS defending our borders. And instead, we've got Harry Reid dictating a game that is really brinkmanship, and it's terribly dangerous. And I think that the failure in House leadership has been not to have been talking about this for months now, and really putting the burden where it belongs, and that's right on Harry Reid's shoulders.
Thank you. Right
here. Do you think that the House will
State your name and organization. That's all right.
Rudy Tackle, Washington Examiner. Do you think that the House will take action on the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act by the end of the year? And if you support it, how do you think it's applicable to protecting something like the OPM? Or if you oppose it, what alternatives would you recommend?
I'll take a stab at that. On the Homeland Security Committee, also spending 30 years in the IT business, I did support the bill, predominantly because of its nature is such. Look at the technology industry has increased in the way that it has and has improved because it's been the least regulated. What I liked about the cybersecurity bill is it let the private sector do what the private sector does, but it creates a community of sharing between the industry and government. And it protects proprietary information. I think it was a good balance because this is the new battlefield that we're on. Cyber is a great risk. Now, whether it goes forward, I don't know. I'm also a member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and we had a hearing recently, and I asked one of the panelists, and I believe he was from I can't remember. It was Inspector General or one of the oversights. Organizations who had been looking into the various data breaches. And I asked him, on an elementary school grading level, how would you grade the federal government's protection against cyber attack? And he said, at best, I give it a D-. A D-. Now, this is the United States of America. And so we have got to make some drastic changes in that direction. So I'm really hoping that we can do something.
Hi, Laura Barone Lopez with the Huffington Post. Just going back to shutdown and Planned Parenthood. In the letter that the majority of you signed, you said that you wouldn't support any funding resolution to prevent a shutdown on the 30th if it includes money for Planned Parenthood, despite saying that you don't want to shut down.
Actually, that's not the letter. The letter doesn't say that. The word shutdown are not in the letter. I wrote it, but go ahead.
Okay, but it says you wouldn't support any funding resolution.
We wouldn't support any funding resolution that includes funding for Planned Parenthood.
And on top of that, though, Republican leadership, like Senator McConnell over the recess, said that the Senate doesn't have the votes to defund Parenthood. So if you go down this path, are you worried
They don't
at
have
all?
the votes to overcome a filibuster. They could change their rules and get past that 60-vote threshold. Then the votes are there, I think, by you.
He also, though, said that there's no way, given of who's in the White House. So
we're going to make every decision we make here in Congress based on whether the president's going to sign the legislation or not. That's not our job.
I'm not saying
The
that.
last time I looked, we're a bicameral, not a unicameral, and we don't have a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
So the process should work, right?
Let me address it this way. We've talked about alternatives, okay? Which is, all right, we say we want to defund Planned Parenthood. Our Democrat friends say, y'all hate women and you're against women's health. We said, all right, we're not. But to prove to you that we're not, we'll simply move that money from Planned Parenthood to the federal health clinics, okay? They serve much the same population. They provide many of the same services. They don't provide abortions, nor do they sell dead baby parts. So now here we have funded, to the gentleman from the Financial Times question, we have funded the entire government, and we have provided for the exact same level of women's health as we would have otherwise. Why are you going to veto that? Why are you going to filibuster that? What's the argument against that particular piece of legislation? That question hasn't been asked yet because, quite frankly, I don't think anybody here, I shouldn't say that. A lot of folks don't want to know the answer. I'd love to see us pass that and put that on the president's desk and have the president explain whether or not he's really for women's health or just for Planned Parenthood, because that's what this battle is really about. It has nothing to do with women's health. Everybody here is for women's health.
And to underscore that, remember, we're funding it at the levels they agreed to. The president agreed to the funding level. So the dollar amount is going to be exactly the same. It will do just what Mr. Mulvaney described. The money, instead of going to an organization caught on video engaging in what looks like criminal activity, will go to other organizations to provide the same services that weren't involved in criminal activity or what looks like criminal activity. Dollar amount's the same. And so the question is, Mr. President, why would you veto that? Why would you filibuster that in the Senate? That is as common sense, logical as it can get. And that's our position. And yet you all guys, we're Republicans are crazy. Come on.
Has Speaker Boehner or Leader McCarthy or anyone in the Republican leadership in the House indicated that they want to do this time around ahead of the
We're going to have a debate.
And we start that at 3 o'clock this afternoon. We start our listening sessions today.
We're having listening sessions, and if there's a better idea on how to defund it, we're open to all ideas. And they're saying that they have some strategic reasons they want to do something differently. We're open to anything that they're bringing forward. But the reality is that just have a show vote on another bill that defunds Planned Parenthood. I don't want to be here. Well, I'm not going to be here 25 years from now, but I don't want to be here 25 years from now or hear any of my friends here 25 years from now saying that I voted to defund Planned Parenthood for 25 years. What they're doing, I don't know if it's illegal. You start getting into a real technical definition of what they did, but what they did is immoral. And I am not willing to give my money, and my constituents don't want to give their money to fund the immorality of what's happening in Planned Parenthood. As a nation, we should not accept what's happening in Planned Parenthood. And we can give that money to women's health organizations that are not committing the horrible, horrendous acts that this organization is committing.
Congressman Hartzell.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, echo my colleague's comments there, that as far as the federally qualified health centers right now, there's 9,170 of those in the country compared to Planned Parenthood, only 700. And nationwide, the federally qualified health centers serve 21.1 million women a year. That's 8 times the amount of women that are served by Planned Parenthood, which is only 2.8 million. So there's already centers out there providing health care for women, and they're doing a great job. We don't need to be funding Planned Parenthood. And I would also say that there's other things I think that we need to do in addition to defunding it, and I think we need to go back to the original law that has allowed Planned Parenthood to think that they have the ability to sell these parts with expense reimbursement. We just need to stop and prohibit the sale of any aborted baby parts for research. I mean, it is just unconscionable, and that needs to be stopped. We need to close that loophole as well.
I'd like to make reference. The original question, I guess, was about Mitch McConnell. He's been around here for 30 years. He knows better. I mean, the idea, we know a standalone bill is not going to be signed by the president, but we also know that hundreds of riders in every appropriations bill that goes through here, unless it's a short-term CR, it's in there. They're in there. He knows that. He stuck many of them in there. Don't forget the last shutdown. He stuck in a $2.8 billion earmark for his home state. He knows how the process works. You're a majority leader. You took over the job January 3rd, 2015. Your predecessor was Harry Reid. You're no longer Harry Reid. You're a Republican, Mitch. Do your job. Stand up. Fight for Republican principles. I look at his election night speech. He said, we're going to make a big change in Washington. It's going to be different. Republicans are looking at the Senate and saying, you know what? I'm not seeing much difference over there, Mitch. Here's your chance.
Here's the point. First of all, I don't think you have to if you do what we've talked about, which is move the money to the clinics, because then you force the Democrats to actually explain why they're against giving more money to an institution that serves the same population. But if he doesn't, okay, and if we preserve these filibuster rules on both this and, say, Iran, then everybody in here has the right to ask, how would things have been different if Harry Reid were still in charge? And the answer will be, there's no difference. It's exactly the same. And that the election did not have any consequences. And I think folks have the right to be upset about that. I raised a bunch of money for Republicans back in South Carolina who run for Senate all over the country, and people are asking me over August, why did we do that? And I don't have a good answer for them. So Mitch is going to have to wake up and figure out that at some point there may be some more important things than some 40-year-old Senate rules. The filibuster rule as it currently practiced in the Senate is not in the Constitution, and it's not 200 years old. They passed it in the 1970s because they're lazy. What they need to do is simply start talking. Make them go ahead and explain a filibuster. If you're really against moving money from Planned Parenthood to the federal clinics, and you are willing to shut the whole government down in order to accomplish that, then go to the well of the Senate and talk about it for 20 hours and tell people why you're against it. Don't sit at some restaurant, have an extra martini at night, and then go home and go to bed. Do your job. And until Mitch wakes up and realizes that he's no different than Harry Reid right now, it's going to be a real rugged couple of months.
All right, we're going to
Let me add one other thing, Genevieve, on this. In 2009, I was in state legislature. We passed exactly this. Take the money from Planned Parenthood and give it to health clinics. It was vetoed by a governor. We did it again in 2009. Finally, we got the right governor in 2011. That's now state law. It works. You just got to follow the process. You got to be willing to fight for your cause. And that's all we're calling on Mitch to do, is do what he promised to do last fall.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Andrew Taylor with the Associated Press. I sense a lot of frustration with the Senate on this Planned Parenthood issue, and I guess my question is, if the Senate disappoints you, as they did earlier this year on the immigration executive orders, and Mitch McConnell throws up his hand and says, we can't pass that, what would your reaction be if Speaker Boehner and the leadership say, well, we don't want to have a shutdown, everybody can vote their conscience, but we're going to have a vote on what Mitch McConnell sends us? Will that incite a revolt against the leadership, or will you be satisfied that the process has seen its way through?
If I understood you correctly, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Nobody's advocating for a shutdown. What I would love to see the House do is take up a CR this week that actually funds the government at our budget level, doesn't blow through the budget caps. We've passed a budget, right? So this is easy. Pick a number that was in the budget. Sets forth the priorities of the appropriations bills that we've already passed. Send that to the Senate. Let the Senate take it up. Put the onus on them. See if Mitch McConnell has the votes over there to take up a Republican version of a CR. And then hopefully a Republican-controlled United States Congress, House, and Senate will send a bill to the president at the budget funding levels that we've set forth, with the appropriations language that we've already passed, that defunds Planned Parenthood, and see what the president does. Then the onus of whether he shut the government down or not is on him. If he vetoes it, we'll cross that bridge. I'm tired of us governing, A, by crisis, and B, under the assumption that something may or may not happen down the road. How about the House of Representatives, controlled by a Republican majority, actually pass bills out of the House that reflect what our constituents want us to do? They gave us the majority for a reason. And so if we pass a CR out that reflects those principles, then let the process work. It works in 49 states in this nation every year. Nebraska's a unicameral. They don't have two chambers, okay? But it works. Let the process work as our founders designed it, and we're not doing that. We hadn't done that for 4.5 years. We pre-conferenced everything, big deals, not having the House reflect its will, the Senate reflect its will, come together for a compromise and a conference committee, or send something to the president and see what he does with it instead of anticipating that.
After spending a month back in district again, which I try to go home every opportunity I can. Well, let me answer your question. I'm going to vote my conscience on anything that comes up. But as I went around to town hall meetings and just coffees meeting with people, the Iran deal and Planned Parenthood, actually Planned Parenthood first, Iran second, were the two things that were that were on everyone's mind. This is significant. And the question was asked earlier, why wouldn't we do what makes sense? Defund Planned Parenthood, send the money somewhere else where we know it would not be used for something that's possibly illegal, but at best immoral. This idea of selling the parts of little babies is so flying in the face of the conscience of most of the people in my district, whether pro-life, pro-choice, regardless of male, female, this is across the board, this is offensive. But the question was, why wouldn't you do this? I would suggest, as everyone likes to do all the time, pull up Open Secrets. See where Planned Parenthood's spending their money? There you're going to find out why. They spend as much in campaign contributions as they do in lobbying. I think you may find the answer there of why.
Look, I've said before, even Belichick doesn't script out the whole game, so you gotta let it play out. Today we came in here back into session, and everyone was functioning under the assumption that the Iran issue would be dealt with in the framework of Corker-Cardin, and now it looks like we're going to deal with it in a different manner. So things change when you have 435 members of the House and 100 in the Senate, and you have debate and you listen to the American people, and that it's a dynamic process. So, let this thing play out. What we do know is lots of people are watching, lots of big issues are coming rather quickly, and we better do the right thing. We better do what we told the voters we were going to do.
And there would be a lot less frustration if we stop pre-conferencing everything. I think if leadership just lets things happen organically, even if it's vetoed by the president, we shouldn't be worried about the veto. The American people will understand, most of our supporters will understand that we have no control over the veto of the president, but we do have control over what happens in the House and the Senate, and that's what the American people are waiting for us to act on.
Andrew, I'll answer your question briefly. Is anybody here from Time magazine, by the way? No? This is from last week's Time. Quote, the Republican-controlled Congress should pass bills to institute a 20-week abortion ban and defund Planned Parenthood, secure the border, and rein in government regulations, regardless of whether President Obama threatens to veto the legislation, adding that if they can't do it, the GOP leadership should step aside, end quote. That's Carly Fiorina. She's now third, I think, in my state. There's a reason that folks like Trump and Carson and Fiorina are getting all the attention that they have, because they're tapping into the sentiment of a lot of people that are tired with what's going on.